And we're back in our basement dungeon gym on a Thursday morning like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Thursday early AM here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Well, we have a movie anniversary. We have a brand name, big box office hit with big legendary movie stars anniversary today, and this is a movie that was based on a super successful stage play by a young, at the time, writer, playwright, and he ended up becoming a successful Hollywood screenwriter. And this is a movie that I don't know if the film as a whole is that well remembered historically, but there is one iconic moment where a lot of the youngins know a particular actor from this one moment in this film, and also an iconic horror film, which this gentleman had starred in about a dozen years earlier. So on this day, 1992, with yours truly, spoiler alert, still a teenager, Rob Reiner's adaptation of Aaron Sorkin's wildly successful Broadway play about mischief, mayhem, and murder at the high levels of the United States military, A Few Good Men opened in theaters. And of course, the two big hitters that I referenced, Tom Cruise, who was still in his 20s when this movie was shot, and the quite iconic and extraordinary John Joseph Nicholson. You might know him better as Jack. So I did not see the stage play. I remember seeing ads all over the city, even though I was not at New York University yet. I still had about almost 2 years, about 21 months before I got to NYU. But I worked for my father, and I was always in the city for that reason. So I remember seeing all of these ads in the subway system about this stage play, A Few Good Men, when it opened. All kinds of acclaim, Tony Award nominations, Obie Award nominations, just crazy hype. And the sense that I got was that it lived up to the hype. And there are certain famous stage plays where you can see the kind of seams showing when they are translated to film. There are some stage plays that didn't really need to be a major motion picture, that you can tell that this is a play. But what Rob Reiner was able to do, in my opinion, with A Few Good Men was, if you didn't know that it was a play, you wouldn't know that it was a play. Unlike another film released just before A Few Good Men, with a huge all-star cast, but it was based on a stage play by another famous American playwright, more famous, David Mamet. I think it was either September or October of 1992, you had the adaptation of Glenn Ross. And if A Few Good Men has Jack Nicholson in arguably the most iconic, famous moment of his career, Glenn Ross has Alec Baldwin's "Put That Coffee Down." Coffee's for closers only. You call yourself a salesman, you son of a bitch? Your name's Levine. Yeah. So the advance buzz on the movie version of A Few Good Men was all good. The word coming out in the, still mostly pre-internet era was that this is a terrific adaptation, and the actors all hit their marks. You have Kevin Bacon, and you had Kiefer Sutherland, and Kevin Pollak, the comedian and actor, has told a lot of stories about Jack Nicholson and some of the shenanigans that he had mentioned about his own career that were kind of off the record, but nowadays people could just talk. I mean, Jack is pushing 90 and seems to be doing well. But I saw this movie. I went with my dad on opening night, and I can't say that I unabashedly loved it, but it was a good movie. And 1992 was also a pretty good year for movies. There were a lot of different kinds of, smaller independent films which made an impression. But then there were the sort of big budget, there were some big budget spectacle movies. And then there were big budget, more personal stories like, for example, Penny Marshall's A League of Their Own. And when I talked about indies, it was a big year with Neil Jordan's The Crying Game, which was a kind of a dark horse Oscar candidate that year and ended up winning one for screenplay. But 1992 ultimately was the year of Clint Eastwood and Unforgiven. That won the big hardware at the Oscars. But the thing is, with memory, and the way memory sometimes works is that in my mind, Tom Cruise had already been around forever. He'd already been a big star from as far back as I can remember, which really wasn't true, but it seemed that way. Cruise already, to me, was an old head. He was somebody who had been around Hollywood for ages, and obviously his career just continued to ascend. But if you just look at this film, because Tom Cruise as Daniel Chaffee, who is a young military man who is an attorney, like if he were in civilian life, he would just be a lawyer. Caffey or Chaffee, you know what? I think it's Caffey, Daniel Caffey, I think. But Cruise had been around, and you know, you go back to like the movie Taps with Timothy Hutt in 1981, and obviously Risky Business was a star-making kind of a film. And then, of course, you had in '85 Ridley Scott's Legend, which it's pretty good. The director's cut is good, but the studio and MCA Universal just fucking butchered it twice in 1 year. MCA Universal had Sid Sheinberg. He almost had the issue with, in 1985, wanting to rename Back to the Future Spaceman from Pluto. And think about, there's no franchise. That film probably doesn't even do that well at the box office. If instead of, here's Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd in Back to the Future, we have them in Spaceman from Pluto. So Sid Sheinberg almost fucked that up, but Steven Spielberg bluffed his way out of that disaster. Sid Sheinberg had the problem with the movie Brazil and Terry Gilliam, where he took that film away from him, and then he took the movie Legend away from Ridley Scott, and just not good. So when Cruise's performance in Legend is, you wouldn't even know that this guy was destined for stardom. It's kind of like the year before. If you watch A Nightmare on Elm Street, number one, Johnny Depp has a big role in Nightmare on Elm Street, the original, and his performance is not good. He doesn't really do anything. You wouldn't say, other than, wow, that's a really good-looking guy. He's a cute teenager. He doesn't do anything. And Tom Cruise is completely lost at sea in Legend. But then he turned from that to Top Gun and The Color of Money in 1986. Top Gun, of course, one of the biggest hits of the decade. You know, rah-rah, pro-America, Reagan era. Again, no judgment. That's just what the movie is. You know, fuck the Russians. And then Color of Money, he holds his own opposite Paul Newman in, unfortunately, the only Best Actor Oscar Newman ended up winning, and I could give you at least a dozen movies where he's better. If anything, Tom should have gotten an Oscar nomination for supporting actor in The Color of Money. But then Cruise turned around and he did Rain Man with Dustin Hoffman, another film where his co-star got the Best Actor Oscar, but Tom arguably has the more difficult role and pulls it off beautifully. He had Cocktail in 1988, a big hit, not very good, spoiler alert, not very good. Then he did the adaptation with Oliver Stone of Born on the 4th of July, written by Massapequa native Ron Kovic, right? Classic movie, Willem Dafoe, just tremendous, tremendous performance. And Tom, he was up for Best Actor, but he wasn't going to win because that was the year of Daniel Day-Lewis in My Left Foot. Sometimes it just be like that. And then Tom had a little bit of a dip. Days of Thunder in the summer of 1990 was not as big of a hit as it probably should have been, given the fact that it was more or less a remake of Top Gun, just with race cars, and you have the Robert Duvall character playing the kind of older, sage, wise, you know, the Tom Skerritt character from Top Gun. These things just keep repeating. It should also be pointed out, though, that Jack Nicholson was in his middle 50s, and his star seemed to kind of fade also. He had the Best Supporting Actor Oscar win for Terms of Endearment in '83. He made a lot of great movies in the '80s, such as Prizzi's Honor with Kathleen Turner and Angelica Houston, John Huston, the filmmaker who directed that. His daughter won the Supporting Actress Oscar, and that was Jack and Angelica had a long-term relationship, no joke. But you know, Jack did The Witches of Eastwick, which is phenomenal, and he made some terrific films. But then when he did a sequel to Chinatown, it just didn't hit. It should have been better than it was, because Jack was also a fine filmmaker. His direction of that movie was good, but it's like, if you're going to do a sequel to one of the greatest movies ever made, I think they probably shouldn't have done that. So Jack was still working feverishly, and here you have A Few Good Men, and Tom Cruise also had another film in 1992, which was a disappointment, Ron Howard's Far and Away, which is basically about the Oklahoma land rush, but that film is just not that good. It's just not, I wanted to like it, and it's like 2 stars out of 4. But Cruise was already just about the biggest star in Hollywood, and there was a certain excitement for this film. The previews made it look great. You know, a little bit of sexual tension between Tom Cruise's character and Demi Moore's character. Kevin Bacon throwing off wisecracks as the kind of prosecuting attorney. Prosecuting attorney. Cruise is playing more or less a defense attorney in this kind of military trial situation. So the film is very good, and it gives us enough of a sense of the larger picture and the realities of life in the military. And this is something that not just people who served, but just laymen who have not been in the military, that it's sometimes difficult to understand that the chain of command often it's absolute. There are things that cannot be monkeyed with except in extreme circumstances. And the reality, what this movie seems to suggest as much about real life and how the military works, is there are going to be situations where for one person's perceived greater good, horrible wrongs will be committed and will be swept under the rug for the common good. And the character that Jack Nicholson plays in the film, Lieutenant Colonel Nathan Jessup, he is that guy. He is a career military man who knows that he has a moral compass, but there are things which he chooses to ignore because he is convinced, and I don't think the character is certainly not ever played for laughs or played as a clown or somebody that's just wrong-headed all of the time. In the manner of Gunnery Sergeant Hartman in Full Metal Jacket, the Lee Ermey character, the opening 45-minute boot camp sequence in Full Metal Jacket. That character, there is no artifice and there is no way he does not believe 100% that what he is doing, dehumanizing every young man that comes under his charge, he is 100% convinced this gives them the best chance to not die in combat if I make them ruthless, hard-hearted killers. They're not going over there to farm the land in Europe, in Asia. They're going over there and bad people are going to be shooting at these boys. And if they're not ready for that, they will die. They might die anyway. But if they go over there with a chip on their shoulder, they have a better chance. And Nathan Jessup, in the world of A Few Good Men, there are certain processes where he would probably seem like a normal commanding officer, and where he is specifically is also a notorious situation. It didn't exactly turn out so good for the United States, Guantanamo Bay. His outpost is very, very close to Gitmo. And as he puts it to Demi Moore, as only Jack Nicholson can, I eat breakfast 500 yards from Cuban soldiers who were trained to kill me. So don't think for 1 minute you can come in here, flash a badge, and make me nervous. Just great line readings. But we understand there are things that happen, that have happened, that just don't get reported. And from a broader sense, if you want to say this is good, I don't know. But the social media era, the fact that news stories, which may not, and most likely in most cases would never have been reported, now instantly, one person with their phone on sees something in Topeka, Kansas, and within a couple of minutes, everyone around the world knows about it. So in the world of A Few Good Men, you have this very terrible hazing situation where there is a young soldier who is struggling and he should be Section 8'd, and this is another thing that Full Metal Jacket gets into. There is an idea, and there was an idea in the United States military in the Vietnam era. We just needed bodies. We needed bodies. It wasn't always a question of, is this soldier passing muster? Is this guy worthy of being in the Marine Corps? Is he worthy of being in the Navy? Is he worthy of being in the Army? We just needed bodies. And in the world of that film, Private Pyle, from the first 2 minutes, he should not be here. He should be sent away and sent back home, or somebody might get killed on our side because this guy is bent. So in the world of A Few Good Men, in both the play and the movie version, which from what I understand is a pretty close adaptation, I mean, it's 90%, there is a hazing situation where a young man ends up dead. And he should not, it is a tragedy. But even while discussing the fact that it's a tragedy, there are characters who would say he was a shitty soldier. I mean, it's not good that he's dead, but he kind of got what he deserved. He had no honor, he had no code, he was here like all of us, and he just wasn't getting it. So there are some people who seem to almost be defending the hazing, which, you're not supposed to kill somebody. Remember in An Officer and a Gentleman, another military movie, mayonnaise, Louis Gossett Jr. screaming at Richard Gere, because his name is Mayo, he calls him mayonnaise. But in that film, you had hazing taken to the extreme. And how much can you stand? How much can you tolerate? Because everybody has a breaking point. And the problem is, some people will turn their hurt, their rage, will turn it inward, and other people will turn it outward. And A Few Good Men gets into a lot of really bad, negative space kind of stuff with regards to how the military would work. And again, not really a criticism, just a reality. So the character in this movie, I think his name is Markinson, played by J.T. Walsh. I mean, J.T. Walsh is all-time end boss character actor. He gave so many great performances in the 90s before he unfortunately passed in 1997. And when Jack Nicholson, when he won, I don't know if it was the Oscar or the Golden Globe, but I think it was the Oscar, when Jack won for As Good as It Gets, at the end of his acceptance speech, he just thanked JT and put his hand on his heart. It was a really nice human moment. Jack, all the glitz and the Laker girls and all the jokes that have been made about him. He really adored J.T. Walsh. And so J.T. Walsh in A Few Good Men, and the character in the stage play, I also assume it's similar. He's somebody who knows that things are rotten in the state of Denmark. And as much as he has respect for his superior officer, Jessup, this can't stand. Somebody has to do something to keep these two young men who are basically on trial. I don't even know if it's called a trial, military tribunal. I don't remember the exact terminology, but it takes the form of a courtroom drama. It's important to note, huge chunks of this film, it's like a courtroom drama. Anatomy of a Murder, with James Stewart back in the 50s, the Otto Preminger film. But that's the kind of movie it is. Hell, even the movie Suspect, speaking of Witches of Eastwick, with Jack's co-star Cher, Suspect from 1987, that's a courtroom drama / courtroom thriller. So the character of Markinson, he wants to come forward and he wants to basically tell the truth. What happened to, I don't even remember the name of the character, but what happened to him should not have happened. He was supposed to have been transferred from this base, not only for his protection, but so that nobody gets involved in any shit that could come back and ruin the rest of their military lives and the rest of their lives in general. This is a very important thing to ponder, because sometimes you not only have to protect one person from others, but you have to protect the others from themselves, because you could have a herd mentality where, are you really going to disobey the code red? Are you going to disobey a direct order from someone like Nathan Jessup, even if you know if this ever were to come out, you might spend 30 years of your life in jail? And then you get into the whole thing with the Nuremberg trials, if you're like me and you go down rabbit holes where you say, how culpable is somebody for following orders, where if they don't follow it, even if the order is completely illegal, they could get court-martialed and maybe go to jail for that. Sometimes you're just fucked. And this movie shows that sometimes in the military, even with good intentions, you're just fucked. The character that J.T. Walsh plays tries to do the right thing. He gets dressed down by Nathan Jessup. And Jack is very good in this particular scene, where he's known this guy. These guys have known each other since they were very young, probably in their early 20s. And they both moved up the ranks. They're both really good soldiers, good leaders of men. But for whatever reason, Nathan Jessup has advanced further. And he makes it clear, no offense, don't ever fuck with me again. I don't know why I was promoted to levels that you weren't, because we both know you're a terrific soldier. Don't ever question my authority again. And he's smiling, but the implication is he cuts this guy off at the pass. You ever open your mouth again, not only is your career ruined, life's over, buddy. Just keep your mouth shut. Mind your fucking business, is what it comes down to. And the turn with that character, I remember seeing it in the theater, and when we all realized what was about to happen, it's simultaneously a terrible and amazing cinematic moment. And again, J.T. Walsh, an actor who usually played heavies or villain-adjacent kind of characters. And I mentioned the film about three movie stars, Tequila Sunrise, with Kurt Russell and Michelle Pfeiffer and Mel Gibson. J.T. Walsh plays an FBI agent in that movie who's working with Kurt Russell's Nick Freesia. But his character is really grimy and he's just an asshole. And so that's a movie where he plays not really the villain, but he plays a character who is a little bit what you would call villain adjacent. But then you look at what he does in Breakdown in '97, one of his last roles, where he's the big bad, and man, is his character scary as fuck. I want to see a movie where that guy goes against Nathan Jessup. That would be a hell of a battle. But then you look at him in Outbreak, where he plays a top level, I don't know if he's a defense secretary, but he's somewhere in the cabinet. And they're having all these conversations. We're just gonna destroy entire United States towns to try to stop the spread of the virus. And he says, hey, I've read the Constitution, assholes. We can't do that. You be real careful about what you say. We have no right to deprive fellow Americans of life, liberty, and property, and we can't do shit. So if we're gonna do this, there has to be no other way. And A Few Good Men, unfortunately, shows us that sometimes in the military, even with the best of intentions, that great soldiers, sometimes they just have to keep their mouth shut. It's the way it goes. You know, and me watching the film, I like to think of myself at 18, I was idealistic, and I'm like, this is unfair, and it is, but what are we taught from a very young age? Sometimes life just isn't fair. Sometimes good people get put in terrible situations, and sometimes bad people get put in good situations, and shit just happens. And the film famously climaxes with Tom's lieutenant, Daniel Caffey, that's his name. It climaxes with him trying to maneuver his questioning in such a way because Nathan Jessup, for all of the bluster, he is somebody who appears to have a temper, but he also knows how to answer questions. He's used to being under tension and under stress. His whole life, he's been a soldier. He's been a star soldier. He is legitimately a badass. He's not pretending. He's not cosplaying. He's, for better or worse, the genuine article. He's the real deal. And Cruise is pretty sure this guy did shit he can't do, and we can't let him get away with this. These two boys on trial were just following orders. Again, they could still get in trouble. But they should not get into the level of trouble that we are presented with. And it's, again, very important to note there are these distinctions. And the movie Nuremberg, which I haven't seen, and even Judgment at Nuremberg, the movie from the early 60s, gets into this. These are all really difficult things to wrap your head around. But it's reality. And A Few Good Men gets into all of these different angles where when is it okay to disobey a superior officer? And what level of responsibility does someone have when they don't think they have a choice? And they might be wrong, they might be right. They don't have a choice. So the famous scene where Tom Cruise is he's kind of trying to trap Jack Nicholson's character by getting him to lose his temper and lose his cool. Maybe he'll admit something because, I mean, that's the way it works. I think about how often in movies where a character gets flustered and says something that if he were not under strain, he wouldn't say. He would have enough wits to just, well, we won't talk about that and not bring it up. So the moment in this movie is that Jessup is basically admitting that he's operating a little bit where he's not behaving in an honorable fashion 100% of the time. That he's engaged in behavior, that he does things as a soldier, as a leader of men. He says, you know, I'm probably grotesque to you because you have no idea what it's like here. And the reality is people like me are necessary to try to defend the freedoms that you enjoy, that we all enjoy. And that's where he starts almost sneering because he's on this wall right there, right by Gitmo. You want me on that wall. You need me on that wall. Cruise just keeps asking, and you can see he doesn't really want to answer this. This is going to go down a bad road. You want answers? Hey, I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth, and then you can't handle the truth. Well, the irony is that there are a lot of other people who can't handle the truth. But Cruise's character, who is presented as a lightweight and a clown, despite being intelligent, it's tough to take him seriously in the early go. He plays a character like a typical Tom Cruise role from that era, where he's a young hotshot who's used to getting his way and now is coming up against a brick wall, and can he find his way around? But it's not just that Nathan Jessup says you can't handle the truth. That is not what sinks him. That doesn't put him in any sort of legal jeopardy outside of this courtroom. Because there are levels of military punishment that don't necessarily involve where you're going to be in jail for the rest of your life, or whatever the case might be. There's nothing wrong with him saying you can't handle the truth. In that moment, he's being honest. I do a job which is a terrible job, but I believe it's necessary. And it isn't even that. It's the fact that they were cooking the books. They were manipulating who did what at what point. And we say this, we see it in politics. Sometimes it's the actual crime, or sometimes it's the particular misdeed that sinks you. But just as often as not, it's the cover-up. It's the attempt to cover something up. And in the world of this film, not Sanchez, I can't remember the name of the character, but he was supposed to be transferred. And there's something in the wiring of Nathan Jessup that he just can't let it go, because he feels like this guy is a shitty soldier, and we're going to have to really punch him to get him to operate at a higher level. Similar again, where Full Metal Jacket, the character of Gomer Pyle, or Leonard Lawrence is his name, he shouldn't be there. But the idea is, if we beat him hard enough, we can make him a good soldier. It is possible, and that's our job. Our job is not to just send him away. Our job is to turn him into a good soldier. So maybe here, Santiago, man, it was going to drive me nuts. We can lean on Santiago enough where maybe something will click. So I don't think we're going to kill this guy, but we're going to try to harden him, because it is a hard heart that kills. It is a hard heart that we need to defend this country, especially in this hostile area that we find ourselves all the way over here, with all these Cuban soldiers trying to kill me. All of that. So the film does not make a defense of Nathan Jessup, but we understand him. He is grotesque. This is not somebody that you would ever want to meet. But unfortunately, sometimes, you keep the monster out of sight and out of mind. But the events of the story, the monster has to come to the surface, and now what are we going to do? And so the big showdown works. It's great work from Cruise. It's great work from Nicholson. And there's a lot of stories. You can find YouTube. When Kevin Pollak was on with Rich Eisen, Rob Reiner was on with Rich Eisen, the former ESPN anchor. He works for NFL Network, has a terrific podcast. He's a huge movie fan. But Jack Nicholson, as an actor, he's the real deal. He always has been. And I think Reiner told a story that he was doing different takes, or maybe it was that Kevin Pollak told a story like that Rob Reiner was putting Jack through his paces, and he just wanted Jack to hit his marks. He wasn't looking for him to emote. He wanted to get the blocking and the spacing of how he was going to shoot it. But Jack kept delivering his lines as if it was going to be a real take. And the quote was something like, Jack, you don't need to do this. We're not going to be keeping these takes. You can hold a little in reserve. And Jack just smiled and said, Robbie, I love this. I love this. This is what I live for. It's okay. And, every story, there are times where famous, iconic people have feet of clay, and it's like, well, he really wasn't that great. He showed up drunk all the time, whatever. But everybody who has talked about Jack in this movie, A Few Good Men, it's just nothing but, what a fucking brilliant actor. And the fact that he kept hitting the same scene the same way. It's not like he had a different level and sometimes he's quieter, sometimes he's louder. He was on 100% of the time. And Jack was nominated for supporting actor. He didn't end up winning. Gene Hackman ended up winning for Unforgiven. And, you know, I got to say, Gene deserved that award because Gene's performance in Unforgiven, it's a bigger role. I mean, he's almost like a secondary lead next to Clint Eastwood. I think Gene might even have more screen time than Morgan Freeman in Unforgiven. I'm not sure on that. But Gene is extraordinary, and that character has a lot of shadings. Character of Sheriff Bill Daggett, where Nathan Jessup deliberately is like a blunt instrument. And man, Jack plays the hell out of it. So A Few Good Men was nominated for 4 Oscars, including Best Picture, but you knew it wasn't going to win because Rob Reiner was not up for Best Director. And 92, it was just Clint's time. You know, Clint made this incredible comeback. I just talked about it in the episode with The Rookie, which came out December 1990 and bombed. And then Clint kind of resurfaced, made Unforgiven, and it got all the acclaim. But as far as box office, A Few Good Men only cost it only cost $40 million in 1992. But that's including, you know, salaries and everything. And the film grossed $243 million around the world. And this time I didn't check to see what was the spread between domestic, you know, and European and the worldwide grosses. I just know it grossed $243. So it is a film that is considered a really solid adaptation of a terrific play. It has a lot of the rah-rah, you know, patriotic kind of moments, but it also has the occasional moments of quiet. And I don't think that it's one of Cruise's best characters. The character is a little bit maybe too slick for his own good. And I guess that's part of the point. But the way that he's able to figure out a strategy, and this is something that certain critics really liked and others didn't. Roger Ebert liked A Few Good Men, but he thought the film made a mistake in the way that it shows, and we see Tom Cruise planning exactly what he's going to do to try to get Colonel Jessup to slip up, and then he doesn't. Spoiler alert, but then he doesn't. And Ebert said, you know, I feel like they should have left a little bit of that out so that we would have been surprised, because he's like, I'm going to set this guy up for a fall, and then he sets the guy up for a fall. Like there's no misdirection. He thought it was just a little bit too on the nose. But this is one of those movies where, and I talked about this concept, for example, with Paul Newman, with Clint Eastwood, with Robert Redford, Warren Beatty, Dustin Hoffman. If somebody's asking me for a primer, you know, you have a lot of young people who they've seen The Shining and they've seen You Can't Handle the Truth on TikTok thousands of times. But if I'm asked a question, I know somebody, young person says, I know who Jack Nicholson is. I've seen The Shining and I've seen clips from other movies. But what are some films, if I want to understand what made this guy, what made Jack Nicholson Jack Nicholson? Chinatown, for sure. I would argue that's the best movie that Jack Nicholson was ever in, and it's maybe his best performance. Didn't win the Oscar. They gave it to Art Carney for The Late Show. I don't know that. I don't really even understand. Not The Late Show. What am I talking about? Harry and Tonto. Excuse me. I don't know what they were doing there. That was ridiculous. I mean, Gene Hackman in The Conversation had as much of a claim as anybody on that award. But Chinatown, A Few Good Men, and if you want to go renegade, even The Witches of Eastwick, where he just lights it up in that movie. Although many people would say terms of endearment. Aurora, you're inviting me into your bedroom. Just great stuff. But so many great performances from Jack Nicholson. Almost never took a movie off. Batman in '89. Winged freak terrorizes. Wait till they get a load of me. Just a fantastic film actor. And you know, keep waiting. Maybe he'll make one more movie. Dustin Hoffman is still working, which is incredible. And Beatty's retired, and unfortunately, Robert Redford, as we know, passed in September. But A Few Good Men, released on this date, 1992, Rob Reiner's really strong adaptation of Aaron Sorkin's massively successful Broadway play about murder and mayhem and cover-ups in the military. This has been episode 652 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your early Thursday morning here with me in New York. If you checked out this episode on the YouTube channel and haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Until then, you can't handle the truth.